Hello, this is Gary Lehman. This is my project for interpersonal communication, HSER 508, summer 2013 for Dr. Tamika Parker. What is communication? Stewart says communication is the continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning making. It has 6 aspects, but the most important is what's called nexting. Nexting is doing something helpful next, responding fruitfully to what's just happened, taking an additional step in the communication process. There's 2 types of communication. The first is impersonal. I did this as a military instructor doing military briefs and writing official documents, and I've also done this on an interpersonal side, which involved my total quality facilitator training, doing lay counseling, and also in this course, HSER 508, which I hope to use for the rest of my life. Impersonal communication is simply the transfer of information, while interpersonal consists of the contact between persons. My overarching goal is to let the words of Christ dwell in me richly, admonishing other people with all wisdom, and doing whatever I do in word or deed in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. This means not being harsh to my wife, and also not provoking my children to wrath, as found in Colossians 3:16-21. Also in Ephesians 4:29 it says, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of my mouth, but that which is good and used to the edifying, that it may minister grace to the hearers." So putting this all together, my OAG is to understand the dynamics of good interpersonal communication and how God has formed me so far, what God's design is for my life, and how I might minister grace with my words and deeds to glorify Him while building strong relationships and bringing good health for myself. My behavioral blend, as found in Uniquely You, starts with the DISC model, which was developed in 1928 by Marston and further brought about in a paper assessment by Gear in 1977. Wishern and Carbonell took this DIS model and developed the 4-temperament model of human behavior, which was used in this course. I will next discuss my behavioral blend. The graph 1, or the first element, is what I believe people expect of me, and this is the inspirational component. This means that I like to size up the situation and find ways to do things better through people. It can mean that I'm too persuasive and too concerned about winning. I'm also sometimes impatient and critical. I'm too concerned about what others think. I don't like breaking rules, but I do like trying new things and sometimes going against the crowd. But who I really am, in graph 2, is a driver. I want to be in charge while collecting information and accomplishing a task. I like to drive myself and to drive others, and I can be dominant and caustic. I'm motivated by choices and challenges to do well. I'm either a determined student or a defiant critic. The positive and negative aspect are on this slide, and basically it shows that I'm verbal and talkative and persuasive. But this is both positive and negative, depending on the situation and if I'm doing communication correctly or not. From the positive aspect, I like to be a thoughtful communicator, an encourager. I like to be interactive and responsive. I like to provide zealous input. But from a negative aspect, I can be critical. I can punish with information and words. I can be controlling and opinionated. Some of the barriers and noise pollutions from the external. Interruptions. Everybody these days has trouble with cell phones, and I'm not an exception. So to help mitigate this, it's good for me to put my cell phone away when I'm trying to do serious conversations and serious communication. From a physical aspect, it's best to choose a good time of the day when you're not fatigued to handle important conversations, when you're well rested and you have full attention. Where I work with a lot of people from other countries, so there's a semantic barrier to my communication. So sometimes I have to use mirroring and paraphrasing to echo back what they've said to make sure that I understood. And also I have to continuously learn their culture so that I can better understand through their eyes. Internal barriers include biased listening, and to help mitigate this, sometimes I repeat accurately or use parafeeling or parathinking as brought out in Peterson's. book, and basically that's reflecting back to them what they've said and what they feel and what they think to make sure that you're capturing what you're receiving. From the emotional aspect, you attack the problem and not the person. The relationship's the problem and not your partner in a marriage. You also need to practice gracism. I need to practice gracism, and basically this is not returning evil for evil, but it's returning good for evil. It's turning the other cheek. And a good sentence that I learned from this course was, I heard you and I have a different perspective. And basically what this is doing is it's acknowledging you heard what the other person said, but you're then going to tell them that, yeah, but I have a different perspective. And this is that you're not attacking them, but you're basically attacking the problem, and you're identifying a different perspective. There's 3 different types of listening styles that sometimes I have trouble with. Sometimes I can be a ritual listener or faker. Basically, that's acting like I'm listening when I'm not. I tend to do this sometimes with my MRDD clients who will just continue talking for 4 or 5 minutes without any break. And sometimes I have to tell them to basically to stop. I address their poor communication and they're continuing to talk, and so that I'm not just acting like I'm listening when I'm not. Interrupter, when I find another strong personality that wants to force their position, sometimes I turn it right back on them, and no good communication is going on. So sometimes we have to step back from the situation, identify poor communication, so that we're both communicating at a level 1. Logical listening has to do with just listening to the message and not the meta message, and sometimes you have to dig deeper down into what's being said and look for nonverbal cues. There's basically 5 courses of action that I've listed. One is just understanding what the contact quotient is, also learning to become an empathetic listener, reducing criticism, because I am critical, and Stewart says I care, therefore I criticize, and this has to do with understanding meta-communicating and meta-messages. There's the 5 steps to preparing to argue, deciding if it's a good time or you're supposed to even be arguing, and then also improving listening skills. Stewart says there's a direct link between the quality of your communication and the quality of your life, and there's research out there that I've listed on my slide that basically shows that your physical health can be poor if you don't communicate well. Plans of action. The contact quotient basically says that the quality of contact achieved over the quality of contact possible gives you your contact quotient. It increases by enjoyable conversations, physical interaction, and positive interaction, and decreases by things like silent treatment and arguments. Empathetic listening. You need to be attentive, alert, non-distracted. You need to be interested. You need to have a I'm okay, you're okay attitude, as Harris did in his book in 1969. This means being a sounding board, asking a few questions, paraphrasing information back, and avoiding certain phrases like, it's not that bad and it'll be better tomorrow. Don't get hooked on jumping into judgment before you've heard the whole conclusion. You have to use listening indicators like I see and right and nodding your head and tell me more about it. Also, there's ground rules to empathetic listening, meaning you don't interrupt, you don't take the subject off, you don't interrogate, as like the Perry Mason style that Peterson talks about. You don't preach, you don't give advice, but you do reflect back what the talker has said. When you're planning to argue, you need to decide, is this issue resolving itself? Do I really need to address it? Or can I just let it go? And is this the right time? Once again, if you're tired, you need to wait till a better time. And you need to remember that communication is the aim, and you need to identify that what you're arguing about is the problem and not the partner. And lastly, there's basically 12 different steps to improving your listening that I've listed here, such things as finding areas in common, taking the initiative, practicing what went wrong. We spend 70% of our waking hours verbally communicating, but are only 25% effective at listening, according to Nichols. Lastly, Romans 12:1 and 2 basically talks about that our goal is to renew our mind and be transformed, and this includes our conversation so that it glorifies God.